we as the religious left, we have to
Yeah.
say that goodness is added to our society when relationships of
Yes.
accountability occur, right?
Yes. Relationships of accountability. Yes.
When
Yes.
we enter into relationships that don't tell other people what has to happen, but give those people who are oppressed the agency to create their own liberation with us at their backs.
Hi, this is Aisha Hauser. I'm a minister at the Church of the Larger Fellowship, and this is our podcast. I wanted to thank you for joining us today. I hope this inspires you, hope it builds your faith, hope it gives you perspective to experience the power of Unitarian Universalism at work in your life. Enjoy the message.
Greetings, beloved. Welcome to another episode of the Voices of Unitarian Universalism, which we lovingly call The View. It is good to be with you. It is good to be with you. I'm the Reverend Dr. Michael Tino. I am 1/3 of the lead ministry team at the Church of the Larger Fellowship, your Unitarian Universalist congregation without borders or walls, this congregation that brings you this talk show every week from September to June. Every week for now 12 years. This is, believe it or not, View episode 435. We're doing a host roundtable. Today, we've changed the name when it's just the hosts to host roundtable because we actually think that we're interesting enough to have a conversation that is relevant about Unitarian Universalism, about our world, about our work for liberation in this world, about anti-oppression and anti-racism issues, and about random crapola that you will only hear here. We're going to be talking about random shit, but it's going to be relevant to the world that we live in. So I am here today with my co-minister, Aisha Hauser, and the Reverend DC Fortune. I am joining you from Peekskill, New York, which is in the lower Hudson Valley of New York State on the land of the Kitchewan, Wappinger, and Munsee Lenape peoples, where summer is doing its annual dance with fall. It is lovely late summer here, and you'll learn more about late summer in my yard in our weekly message from the Church of the Larger Fellowship next week, if that is something you subscribe to. And if it's not, we invite you to CLFUU.org to learn how you can subscribe to that weekly message. How are you today, Aisha?
Hi, I'm Aisha Hauser coming to you from Seattle, Washington, the land of the Coast Salish people. How am I? I'm so excited that I got the show on air. DC, how are you?
Hi, everybody. I am all right. I am DC Fortune. I am coming to you from the western shore of the northern branch of the Susquehanna River, which runs for a very long ways through the Poconos down to the Chesapeake Bay and the historic lands of the Susquehannock people in central Pennsylvania.
Where do we start with conversation this week? Do we start with Unitarian Universalism or with our world?
No, we got
Because
to start with our world because hearing about the Israeli government's attacks on Lebanese people who had nothing to do with October 7th, because let's be clear,
Yep.
the reason given for this genocide against the Palestinians is October 7th. So the Lebanese, Hezbollah, I don't care what you call them, had nothing to do with that. So please explain to me, like I'm a kindergartner, why Lebanese people are being attacked and we're killing Lebanese children now. Please help me understand.
and I can't help you understand except to say like the fuck shit of empire. But
Michael was the first one to say fuck.
and the first person to
12,
say shit.
12.
Clear your cards, people. We're getting a bingo today. I've heard interviews with like security experts and people who know what's going on in that area, and they say that in order to orchestrate, and if you've not been paying attention to the news, know that in the last couple of days, pagers and walkie-talkies have been exploding in Lebanon because the Israeli government and the Israeli Defense Forces packed them with explosives and then shipped them to Lebanon for people to use, explosives that were set to detonate when the Israeli government pushed a button. And the experts on this that I've heard have said very clearly that to coordinate an attack like that took at least a year and probably more,
Oh yeah.
right? So this is very clearly not anything to do with October 7th, and not anything to do even with recent skirmishes between Hezbollah and Israel. And we can unpack those like in all of their glory, but let's just say there's been fighting at that border for a long time. It has nothing to do with the recent fighting. It has to do with a long-term strategy. And I feel like we need to say very clearly things that we've been saying very clearly since October 7th, right? You don't blow up children and call it self-defense.
I don't care
You,
what your problem is. Bombing children will not solve it.
you don't blow up refugee camps and call it self-defense.
Thank
Nope.
you.
You don't bomb
Thank you.
hospitals and call it self-defense. You
No.
you don't indiscriminately blow up electronics and not care who's standing next to who at the market and call it self-defense. Thousands of people are maimed because of these bombs planted in pagers and walkie-talkies. Dozens of people are dead. I'm sure that the numbers will increase. Official numbers, and I put that in scare quotes for those of you who are listening to the audio podcast. Official numbers are always way lower than we know the actual numbers to be in things like this
And
because
when there is retaliation, then they're going to say, we're the victims. The Israeli government's going to say, even though they picked a fight with Hezbollah and they were trying to pick a fight with Iran, are they trying for World War III and to destabilize the entire region? Because it sure as shit looks like it to me. If it walks like a duck and acts like a duck, for anyone listening, my hands are flailing because I don't know what to say.
great, the Egyptian and the Italian are talking with our hands.
And the Irish is over here being melancholy and mad.
Okay, Revs, here's my question to us as faith leaders.
Oh God.
So there is clearly a fear, and I'm going to use the word fear quite intentionally at this point, of the mainstream, whether it's mainstream media or just society in general in this country, except for those who've already been nonstop protesting the Gaza genocide. I've not heard enough like outrage about the hostility and aggression of the Israeli government because again, we are told this line about this genocide has to happen. Talk about children. Do you know how many Israeli government officials said that the children who died in Gaza are future Hamas members? Fuck you. You've already decided
Wow.
children are going to be something when they grow up and you have to kill them. What has happened to your soul? So, as faith leaders, how do we okay, here's my question to myself. How do I not become what I hate? Because I am seething with anger at the people who've made these decisions and decided that Arab lives need to be blown up or else. And so, how do we get through to people? I don't know. How do we faithfully talk about this without sugarcoating it and all lives mattering it? How do we talk about this and press upon the danger that we're all in right now? Because destabilizing the Arab region is not good for the planet. Let's just be clear. And it's
Right.
already happening. So, how do we talk about this as faith leaders? Because I don't fucking know, except to say this is fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
think we have to be clear about morality, right? In the lead up to this show, we sort of have a conversation with each other about what are we going to talk about and how are we going to talk about this, and nothing ever gets clear in those conversations, but we do amp each other up. And I brought up the fact that there are actually tenets of what a just war is. And yeah, we can put those in scare quotes too, because they are tenets that were created by empires. They were
Hmm.
tenets created by people in power. The fact that they even exist is maybe a clue that humanity has to get its collective act together, right? And they do exist.
And if you're going to have tenants, if you're going to have rules, you've got to have some sort of consequences when people fuck them.
And I think you have to have people whose job is to look at things through the lenses of morality and ethics, educating people that these tenets exist, what they are, and that they're being broken right now, right? Because there's not the political will for consequences if people don't know just how egregious what's happening is.
Right.
And is it nice? Is it good? Is it just? Is it liberatory that we have to create political will for that? No, it's really not. Again, humanity, we need to get our collective act together. And the reality of the United States government and our complicity in and leadership of empire in this world is that nothing happens without
Right.
creating that political will. Right? The United States has a law on our books that it is illegal for our government to provide military foreign aid to any foreign government that does not let in humanitarian aid to refugees.
Right.
It is a law of the United States that our government pretends does not exist.
Right. Right.
It's just like, okay, bomb the UN refugee people and we'll still give you military aid with our bombs, with the bombs that we sent you. Please bomb the UN refugee people. Please bomb Doctors Without Borders and World Kitchen as they're trying to feed and heal people. And we'll give you more bombs, even though we have this law, right? And probably more of our voo-vooers than the general public. How many people out there know that law exists? Right? So I think you ask what's our religious leader response is it's to educate people that we actually have some safeguards in place. And those safeguards are being run roughshod over.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we need to like use our collective voices to say, hold on a second. So
Yeah.
thank you, Ryan. Yeah. How do we teach
Ryan says,
children about this? Ryan says, Aisha, I appreciate your righteous outrage. As a religious educator, I feel so much frustration at the seeming indifference within my congregation. Yeah. And it goes beyond that too, right? There's hostility sometimes
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
in
Yep.
congregations. I know so many religious professionals that every time Israel is mentioned have to walk on eggshells because to criticize Israel is seen as anti Semitic. And we've been very clear on this show that we are not criticizing Judaism. We are not
Nope.
criticizing the Jewish people.
Nope. Nope.
We're criticizing the government of a sovereign state that has chosen to behave in ways that are outside the norms of morality and justice in our
Yes.
world.
Say that.
Right? There's a reason why Ireland and South Africa brought Israel to the International Criminal Court because they're behaving in ways that are outside the norms of justice and civility and the ways in which we as a collective body of humanity internationally have decided are appropriate to treat people. Right? They are outside of those norms.
Here's what I want to say, because I preached about this a couple of weeks ago,
Mm,
Belfast to Gaza. The more I learned about the Good Friday Accords in 1998, that was led by George Mitchell, the peace between Northern Ireland and really the Irish people, because it was Britain that colonized Northern Ireland and they were bringing more and more British. Okay. Why there's been peace is the two big umbrella things. Northern Ireland is led by an assembly. George Mitchell's the son of Lebanese immigrants. Lord
Yes.
have mercy.
He used to be
Okay,
my senator.
I know, from Maine. That's
Yeah.
right, George Mitchell. So the Northern Ireland Assembly, which governs Northern Ireland, pretty much has autonomy beyond just what
Yeah.
happens in the UK, right? I mean, their own sovereignty. And it is co ruled by nationalists and unionists, people who believe they want to stay part of the UK and people who want reunification with Ireland. So that's one, is that there's sovereignty and co-leadership. The second huge thing is they removed the hard borders. By hard borders, I mean the checkpoints. There used to be on the highway checkpoints between Ireland and going into the UK controlled Northern Ireland. So they were removed after the Good Friday Accord. So they've been gone for a couple decades, right? When Brexit happens, and one of the questions on the table is security because Ireland didn't leave the EU, because leaving the EU was stupid, but that's
Right.
another show. When Boris Johnson, who is whatever, said, "Oh well, we'll bring back the checkpoints," the Irish said, "If you bring back the checkpoints, bombing's going to start tomorrow." So they did not bring them back. I was just there in July. We just drove on a bus, and the tour guide said, "Hey, we just drove into Northern Ireland. It was like going from Washington to Oregon. No big deal." So they removed the hard barriers. So the Irish people in Northern Ireland were given their sovereignty back in every way. Contrast that to the Palestinians who since 1948 have never, ever, ever been given their sovereignty, ever, and been told since 1948 there was the Nakba and people, over 700,000 people were displaced, thousands were murdered, slaughtered. That has not ended. And the Palestinians are told, you're terrorists, you need to be controlled. There is no sovereignty for the Palestinians. And the United States, instead of sending George Mitchell, the son of Lebanese immigrants, to Palestine, has done everything they can to enable the Israeli government in keeping Palestine from becoming sovereign. In fact, we're sending bombs, we're funding a genocide. So the contrast, if the United States wants peace in a region, it will happen because it happened in Northern Ireland and nobody thought it would happen. The troubles happened for decades. There was bombings both in the UK and England and in Ireland. So don't tell me that it's impossible, but it's impossible if you keep dehumanizing an entire group of people and calling them terrorists without any context.
As you're talking, I'm thinking, what the fuck is the United States interest in keeping this up?
To have an empire outpost in
Okay,
an
but
Arab region.
but the Empire
Access
Outpost is still there if there's a two-state solution, right?
access to access to Israeli intelligence.
Which is
Yeah.
still there if there's a sovereign Palestinian state that exists next door to a sovereign Israeli state.
I think part of the price of access to intelligence is that the U.S. stays out of that conflict.
But we're
I
not
say
staying
in
out
that
of it.
conflict. We're in it.
The price of that is that the U.S.
Unabashedly take the Israeli side in that
Exactly,
conflict, no
yes.
matter how
Yeah.
egregious the Israeli side is.
Yeah.
And I think my brain goes to President Eisenhower. I was not alive when he was
That's
president.
before all of us, Michael.
Okay, so I'm taking us back to the 50s when President Eisenhower, the last general to become president of the United States, hopefully forever, but warned in a State of the Union address or inaugural address, I don't even remember what, warned us of our dependence on the military industrial complex.
Yes, that's right.
Right? He
Yep.
saw it coming as a military leader.
Yep.
And warned us in 1950 whatever
Yep.
that if we didn't pay attention to this, it was going to bite us in the ass.
If we hitch
Here
our
we are.
economic wagon
To building bombs,
to building bombs,
then we need the
in the
bombs to be
same
used.
right. In the same way, if people operate prisons for profit,
hmm
they need prisoners,
Right.
they need fodder
Yeah.
to make money. Both are unabashedly immoral and make me want to smash things.
The thing that's discouraging is we don't have to live this way. Everything's about the story we tell ourselves as a society and as a people. That's what cultures are. And to tell the story of such destruction and dehumanization, like to even wear the keffiyeh or even say you are pro-Palestinian, like Michael said, there are people who become hostile when you say, hey, let's not kill Palestinians, let's not destroy entire generations of people, wipe them off the face of the earth. And somehow that's controversial.
I had a colleague who will remain anonymous who posted something about the genocide that was happening, and it was something very mild about Palestinian sovereignty. It was not like even something super controversial. And someone took to her Facebook page and called her a kafia Karen because she wears one in her profile picture, I guess. And
Wow.
the fact that that is a term, so thoroughly revolted me. And I wasn't getting into someone else's argument on their Facebook page. I'm done with that. And she defended herself in that moment. But it's wow.
Premise being it is unacceptable to support Palestinians. That's the premise, that there
That's
is
the premise.
a
Yeah.
whole mindset that it is unacceptable and somehow wrong to defend the Palestinians. Intellectually, I can understand a lot of things, But spiritually and emotionally, the deep pain that goes with that cannot be overstated. And believe me, I know the famine in Sudan where there's millions of people dying, that's happening. Congo, I have an iPhone because children in Congo are mining for, I mean, we live with cognitive dissonance every day. And within the horrors of the world that keep the one that feels like we could stop this horror. This actually 3 days is the estimate. If we stop sending money and weapons to Israel in 3 days, this would end. But we're not, which I'm in a couple weeks, I'm doing a sermon about finding joy in the midst of all of this. And I'm working really hard because not having joy doesn't help the world either. And we have to remember what we're fighting for. And
It's one of the reasons why I wrote my weekly message for next week about my garden, because I'm like, it can't be about injustice every week. 2 out of 3 weeks, sure, right? There's enough pain in this world.
Mm.
But like, where do I find renewal to like keep
yeah,
facing it, to keep
yeah.
coming back to this conversation? My member of Congress is useless. He's a first term Republican MAGA supporter who like got elected because the Republican Party in New York decided 2 years ago to go 110% racist in their advertisements and managed to like stoke the fear of white people in the suburbs into voting for Republican candidates. And hopefully that wave has passed. I mean, using racism in campaigns has not passed. Let's just be
Yeah,
clear. But
yeah,
hopefully that wave of fear response has passed. So, like, who do I call?
yeah.
My senior senator is the highest ranking Jewish elected official in the United States, and he has openly called for Benjamin Netanyahu to be forced out of office.
Which was huge. For
Right?
Chuck Schumer to do that was huge.
Over this. To be clear, over the atrocities that are being perpetrated by Israel right now, not because of other reasons, because of this.
Okay. So one of the things I'm doing, buying kafiyas from Palestinian owned and shops. I mean, I don't know that anything's coming out of the West Bank even because they're getting
Mhm.
attacked too. That's
Yep.
been happening. But I'm trying to support Palestinian owned, Black owned businesses. Like I'm trying to do what I can where I can. So I don't just I mean, I am finding joy. There's so much joy to be had, and I'm holding the pain of what's happening and feeling
Mm.
like, okay, we have a platform. Let us make as much noise as possible.
Can we get Darby's comment in here a little late, maybe?
Oh,
Darby Lockridge, beloved CLF member, and our treasurer says, dropping in late with this comment because I was driving, literally pulled over to say that having an imperialist outpost in the Middle East requires allowing them to continue imperialist tendencies.
yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
Darby.
fair. That's
Mhm.
fair. Yep.
And I guess like maybe we should be happy. I'm twitching as I say happy that the
Woo!
empire of the United States is consistent. Darby
Darby,
says we would risk failing at imperialism if we didn't perpetuate it. Domestically, we still practice it with territories like Puerto Rico and Guam.
Darby's on
Being,
fire,
Go Darby. Like pulling
right?
over and preaching a word. Wow. Yes. That's exactly right. It is to maintain empire. And this country will, by any means, destroy the already oppressed children. We're perfectly fine. This country's perfectly fine continuing to send bombs to murder babies, pregnant women, children. But I can't not laugh. We have a whole contingency of people who call themselves pro life. And I put them in bullshit quotes because
Right.
there's nothing pro life about this culture, this United.
And we also have those are the same people who think dead school children is the price you have to pay to live in America.
yep.
So it's not
Yeah.
about
It's a
it's
fact
not
of
about
life that our
valuing life.
schools.
It's not about
Yeah.
valuing children. It's about being insecure about your manhood and needing something to compensate when you feel powerless. I want to smash things.
I'm going to take us in a little off direction,
Oh,
but it's
please.
sort of maybe connected. I don't know.
Please.
Let's go on a journey. Come walk with me. So earlier, maybe last week, Taylor Swift endorsed Kamala. Like no big
Right.
surprise. So did Dick Cheney. So who gives a shit? But here's my question. Not for nothing, not to be.
She's
But
got 280 million followers.
Yeah.
So
But here's my question. So then because I'm a total avid TikTok follower. I'm on TikTok, and people were showing clips of Megyn Kelly's, the former Fox News person, furious Taylor Swift, and she's like, "F you," and I'm like, I'm genuinely puzzled, like, why? And the thing that she said was, "F you, Taylor, because you're supporting Tim Walz because he supports the LGBTQ community." And I'm like, why is that making her so genuinely? I'm like, what did I miss? I mean, I don't watch Megyn Kelly, obviously, but like, what's happening? Really?
Because it's about who is an easy target to rile up their base.
I
Um,
get, yeah, maybe I'm just being naive because she was so. It's one thing, I mean, yes, but like her personal anger at Taylor Swift, I was thrown by that.
Well, this past week at the congregation I serve, we showed Bad Faith
mm,
Oh, I
Friday
haven't seen
night.
that yet. I haven't seen it. Is it really good?
For somebody who's an old political hack like me, this stuff goes back to when Jesse Helms was young.
yep, and a Democrat.
And, yeah, and Strom Thurmond, although Strom Thurmond was
Just to be
never
clear.
young, but they've got pictures of him back before he looked quite dead.
She said, oh man, no, you did
but-
it. Strom
but
Thurmond was
honest-
never young.
But the whole thing is white evangelicals didn't give a flying rip about abortion
Oh yeah,
until
exactly. That's
they
exactly right.
glommed onto it as a way that could be their unifying message when it became unpalatable to be quite so overtly racist.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? When the Supreme Court said that institutions that practiced racial discrimination could not, by definition, be charitable institutions, places like the big religious colleges, what is it, Liberty, and those places suddenly lost their 501c3 status.
Mm.
They could not get federal funding.
This was in the 70s?
Yeah.
When did that happen?
70s or 80s.
Okay, gotcha.
I don't remember, but that's when they switched to suddenly what happened was the strategists said they were playing a longer game than any of us realized.
Oh, and they were open about it. We're
Yep.
going to overturn Roe v. Wade. I mean, there was no, this was
Yeah,
not
and
a
everybody
secret.
was like, yeah, right, whatever,
They didn't
sure.
believe it,
Yeah,
even though they said it out loud. This
Yep.
was not a secret.
right. Yeah, it just, oh my God. And I don't even remember where I was going when I was talking about that.
So you
We're
showed this
going on a
documentary.
the
Right.
documentary, Bad Faith.
Right. And abortion and LGBTQ stuff, anything that
Became a
threatened
culture
the
war.
patriarchy,
Right.
not just specifically the white patriarchy, but the patriarchy, because that way you get to loop in disempowered Black men who are hoping that
Yes.
they will have some sort of agency, sort of power by proximity in this culture, right? Even though clearly the evangelical right doesn't want anything to do, like their whole purpose was to go back to segregation, but they couldn't say that out loud.
To support white nationalism. Right. They
Right.
can't say that out loud. They have to pretend it's something else.
Exactly. And it was like, I recommend, we watched it on Tubi, Tubi,
Okay.
which is a free thing. I mean, you have the commercial breaks throughout it,
Fine.
which actually served us well because we had a group of maybe 14 people here. And those commercial breaks allowed us time to go, okay, how's everybody feeling?
Yeah, check in with your body.
Everybody breathe in, breathe out.
Exactly.
Breathe in, breathe out. Okay, some of you remember this stuff. Some of you, this is new. Okay, just letting you know, we're here now. We're with each other. You touch the floor underneath your feet. You're here.
We are not powerless, right? We are the religious left. So what do we do? So I mean, as a religious educator, we teach kindergartners, you have agency. Like, we don't give up our power, right? So we also, because the truth is, the majority, if we're just going to count numbers, doesn't want to live in a Christo-fascist state. That's true. Numbers wise, we don't. However, because of the Electoral College, because of how the system's set up, it's going to take a lot of solidarity, groundwork, and community building and organizing to fight this because we don't want to live in a Christo-fascist state. So, as part of the religious left, how do we gather our people? I literally ask myself that all the time because we have 1,000-member congregations. That's not small. I mean, we may not be as big as the Catholic Church, obviously, but we're also not small.
So, like, my brain is making, for those of you out there in VU land who are not part of the Church of the Larger Fellowship, I just finished teaching a course on process theology to folks from our congregation. And it went well, and it's interesting, but it's like stuck in this part of my brain, right? And so I'm connecting in my head Henry Nelson Wyman, process theologian, Saul Alinsky, famous community organizer,
Yep.
and Monica Coleman, who is a womanist theologian, right? They're in conversation in my brain, and I'm gonna like let that conversation out my mouth, which is to say that like Wyman said that goodness comes from goodness in the universe comes from the creative interchange that is done in relationship,
Yes.
right?
Right.
And Saul Alinsky says that power is done through the building of relationships and
Yes.
networks and community. And Monica Coleman reminds us that liberation happens when the oppressed are given agency to create their own liberation.
Yes.
Right? Okay, so you see where this conversation is happening. We, as the religious left, have to connect those things. And we have to
Yeah.
say that goodness is added to our society when relationships of accountability occur, right?
Yes. Relationships of accountability. Yes.
When
Yes.
we enter into relationships that don't tell other people what has to happen, but give those people who are oppressed the agency to create their own liberation with us at their backs, right? We have to move alongside and behind the people whose liberation needs to be created. And
Yeah.
so that's the conversation that's happening in my head between like dead white dude process theologian, dead white dude community organizer, and very much living womanist liberation theologian in my head. And now you know what my brain looks like right now.
And that is why we're friends. That's my
I just
jam.
had this urge to send lunch to that particular three people, like
Yeah.
so that they have
Yeah.
something to eat while they're in there having this
Yeah.
conversation in Michael's head.
Yeah. It's awesome. It's funny. Last night I was at a BIPOC leadership gathering in Seattle and we were quoting James Baldwin. It was awesome. We were talking about James Baldwin and we were talking about the Black community in Seattle that is reclaiming a lot of what shifted, especially with the tech boom, especially with gentrification. But there is a concerted effort that is really quite, where do I find joy? I found a lot of joy last night in being in this community and connecting with people at this age of my life, people I meet who really want to be authentic and say, hey, we want the world to be better. And I know there's more people that who are
Yep.
in that space. And I just choose to believe that a better world is coming. She's already here. Who said that? That is not my quote. It is someone else's quote.
Arundhati Roy.
Arundhati Roy. That's right. It's a beautiful quote. It's much longer. I'm not good at quoting the way Michael is. Michael's much better than that.
Another world is not only possible, she is on her way.
She is on her way.
Something I've noticed over the summer, I preached on July 21st,
Mm.
like 2 hours before Joe Biden said, I'm dropping out of this
Oh,
contest.
yeah.
The next time I was in the pulpit was a month later, just after the Democratic National Convention.
Uh,
And the sea change
mm,
in energy on the liberal half of the world,
yeah.
or the liberal half of our country, told me that we are desperate for joy and for hope.
Yes. Yes.
And we have been, it's one of those things like you don't realize how much weight you were carrying until you set it down and you stand up and you're like, whoa, what the heck? Or you don't realize how bad your back was until you go to the chiropractor and it gets realigned and suddenly you're like, oh shit, wow. I didn't realize how much pain I was in until it was gone. Right.
Yeah.
So we've had so many years of the hate pumpkin, right? Before that, we had several years of him warming up to that horror show. Then we had the 4 years of the horror show, and we've had the 4 years of the hangover.
Yeah.
And we have just been like, I look at how I've been preaching, and it's all been not so much gloom and doom, but very close to like everything sucks and you need to change it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Like we own this stuff. Blah, like I've just been like railing against all that is wrong.
Right.
And I had really forgotten to insert any kind of hope or happiness or joy in that. And so this week, one of the things that the Soul Matters theme for September is invitation. And so last week I did invitation to joy. This week I'm doing invitation to hope. And I'm using the Pandora's box mythology, which is people forget that she opened this box and all of the shit in the world came pouring out.
Right.
Hate and disease and hunger and just all kinds of terrible, terrible stuff. What we forget is that at the bottom of the box was hope. And it feels like
And she shut the box before Hope got out.
no, she tried. She
Oh.
tried and it didn't happen. Hope made enough noise that she opened it and was like, oh, there's something left. Hope. And so what I have seen since July 21st is that somebody cracked that box and found the hope.
Yeah.
You know, like the energy shifted from the time I got into my car in the parking lot to the time I drove out of the parking lot, which is when I learned that Joe Biden had like the energy of the world shifted in that 10 minutes. And I didn't realize how desperate, how starving for hope.
Yeah.
And for possibility that I was, because I was spending so much time trying to convince people that they were on fire and they didn't know, or they refused to acknowledge. And so this week we're talking about, we've had 8 years of like crap flying out of this box of Pandora's curiosity that was Zeus's vengeance at somebody, one of the other gods giving people fire. Right, so Zeus got back at him by giving his brother this beautiful wife who had incurable curiosity and giving her this box and said, "Don't open it, but here's the key."
Don't eat the apple. There's a theme, and it's always women who are put in these positions.
It's always as
sexism.
Previous to that, she like no other there were no other humans but men. She was the first female. So anyway, but we've all been so desperate for some glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
And so what I found is that my people now feel a lot more motivated.
Yes. Yes.
Right? People with hope don't sit home and cry in their cornflakes. Right? People with hope have something that they want to work for.
Yeah.
And so now, like previous to this, we'd all been like, doing postcards, doing whatever, blah, blah, blah. Now it's like, no, I did 200 postcards yesterday. I need more. People knocking on doors and doing stuff that they haven't done in a while because they haven't felt any hope. And I'm not saying that Kamala Harris is the be all and end all of everything. She's not. She's a complex, imperfect person who's a complex, imperfect person. And this entire cultural shift has a lesson for us if we want to hear it. And that is give them hell, but give them hope. Right? I've been railing about giving them hell for a long time, but I've forgotten to give people hope. And our nation has been so angry. Rightfully so. Those of us on the left are angered at injustice. Those who are on the right are angry that they're being held accountable for bullshit stuff. But everybody's been angry. So we've been fighting against for so long. And it feels like now we've got something to fight for, which is a very different feeling.
It's interesting. I will say she's running to be the leader of an empire, which is not inclined to not being an empire anymore. So there's the problem. But I also want to bring in the perspective, again, like Monica Coleman is It's in my head right now. She doesn't know it. I should send her a fruit basket or something. I don't know. Maybe she gets fruit baskets all the time for people whose like heads she like occupies. Her book, for those who don't know her, is entitled, one of her books at least, is entitled Making a Way Out of No Way. And that phrase comes from Black women's history, because throughout the history of Black women in the United States, people have been forced to make a way out of no way, to find hope even when hope was impossible. Those who were enslaved were forced to do that because it was the only way they could live.
Yeah.
It was the only way they could survive. So I do want to name that people who live with that sort of oppression also live with the challenge to constantly find where hope is.
Yeah.
And here's another theologian that's just come into my head. Miguel de la Torre very famously railed against hope because he used the Spanish translation of esperanza, which comes from the same verb as to wait. And
Yeah.
so if hope is passive hope, if we're just waiting for something better to happen, it's useless to everyone. And hope to the oppressed is active hope. We have to be doing something to make
Yes.
liberation happen.
Yes.
We have to be acting to make liberation happen. So I'm going to invite, as we close our show, thank you, Adam, for your comment from Florida. Yeah, something definitely shifted when Biden passed the torch. Said Adam, in Florida,
Mhm.
where we are, we're all hoping that people come out to protect reproductive rights and justice.
Right?
It's
Yeah.
one of the states where that is on the ballot. Send our love to Florida with regard to that. But I want, as we wrap up our show, because it is 12:58 here on the East Coast, for us to think about how those of us who inhabit dominant identities, whatever those are, can act in ways that are in relationship, in accountability, and in solidarity with those who have no choice but to find hope because it is their only way to survive, right?
Yes.
Amen.
The mother nursing her child in Gaza right now has to have hope in order to keep raising her child,
Yeah.
right? And we need to be in solidarity with her.
Yeah.
We can name instances of those individuals all over the world right now. The woman in Georgia who was miscarrying and so afraid to go to the hospital because of Georgia's draconian anti-abortion law that she died rather than go to the hospital because she was miscarrying. We have to be in solidarity with the children she left behind who are going to need hope to grow up without their mother. And so is that like a super downer to leave us on?
No.
I don't mean it as a downer. That hope is possible because liberation is possible, because relationship is possible, because accountability is possible, because solidarity is possible. Right? So what's the
We're
quote?
mandated. It's
Yeah.
not just possible. We're mandated. Because what I appreciate, I know we're ending, but I really needed that named into the space. Thank you, Michael, and thank you, DC. That the loss of hope is very much comes from people used to privilege, because enslaved people never stopped fighting for their freedom, never, for hundreds and hundreds of
They
years.
couldn't.
They couldn't.
They couldn't.
So, thank you, thank you.
So next week we have our second show with UU the Vote, and we're really looking forward to continuing that conversation. DC and I will not be here, but you'll be here with Aisha and Chris and the folks from UU the Vote.
Gracias por joining us. Special thanks to those of you who give generously to this ministry, be it time, talent, or treasure. It is because of you that this ministry is possible. You can click the link in the description to give now, or visit clfuu.org/podcast for more information. If you enjoyed this podcast, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review so that others can find us. Thanks again for listening.